Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello learners. Today we will review the history of evolutionary concepts from the paper Evolutionary Biology. This is the second lecture from this module where we will discuss the Lamarckism and Darwinism particularly. I am Dr. Sudhir Verma, working at Deen Dayal Upadhyay College, University of Delhi. In this lecture, we will learn about theory of inheritance of acquired characters as given by Lamarck, followed by which we'll discuss about Neo-Lamarckism, which is a revised version of Lamarck theory. After that, we will move to origin of new species by natural selection as given by Charles Darwin. Again, followed by which we'll discuss the revised version of Darwinism, which is also called as Neo-Darwinism. Let us first discuss the first part of our lecture, which is on Lamarckism and Neo-Lamarckism. Lamarck, whose full name is Jean-Baptiste Pierre-Antoine de Monnet Chevalier de Lamarck, was a French naturalist and a soldier. He fought for Pomeranian War against Prussia. After retiring from the army in 1766, because of his deep interest in botany, he got appointment as chair of botany in the year 1788 at Jardin des Plantes, which in French means the botanical garden. After that, he was appointed as professor of zoology in 1793 at Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, which is in English can be translated as the National Museum of Natural History by the French National Assembly. Some of the very famous contributions or publications as given by Lamarck are narrated here, which includes Flore Francoise in 1778, which means the French flora. Lamarck was known for his contribution in classification of the species. He developed the dichotomous key for identification of species. In 1801, he published another book where he classified the invertebrates. Even the term invertebrate has been coined by Lamarck only. Particularly in invertebrates, he focused his work on the mollusks. In 1802, he published another book, and here was the first use of the term biology in its modern sense by the Lamarck. In 1809, he published his masterpiece in terms of evolution, which is termed as Philosophie Zoologique, where for the first time he gave the pre-Darwinian theory of evolution. The Lamarck's view on evolution has been published in these books or publications particularly. For the first time, he used this in the lecture Florel in 1800, and then he published the evolution views in 3 books as narrated here. Particularly, we will focus on the Philosophie Zoologique, which he published in 1809, wherein he discussed the pre-Darwinian view of evolution. As you can see here, this is the first or the cover page of Philosophie Zoologique. The part of the pre-Darwinian views of evolution which he presented here in this book are termed as Lamarckism. Two particular laws which he has discussed in this book are use or disuse, which means the use of a particular organ or not so much use of a particular organ would cause the body structures to either grow if it is being used or to shrink or if it is unused or disused over the generations. You might have heard about the vestigial organs. Here the disuse is with reference to that only. And these changes which either grow or shrink a particular organ because of use or disuse, they are inherited. That is the second law which he has published in this book called Philosophy Zoology. In a nutshell, if you describe the theory of inheritance of acquired characters as given by Lamarck, we can say the changes in structure or function, structure of the organ or the function which it performs, acquired by an organism during its lifetime in response to the environment or use or disuse are inherited by its offsprings which accumulate over time, which means generation after generation. So, in nutshell, if an organism acquires certain characters during its lifetime because of either the environment or the use and disuse of a particular organ, these changes which he has acquired, he transmits them to its offsprings, and generation after generation, this transmission keeps on accumulating, which ultimately leads to evolution or the so-called origin of new species. Here, the simplified postulates of theory of inheritance of acquired character by Lamarck has been represented, which says there is always new needs to the organism. Because of these new needs which an organism has, it acquires new characters. As we discussed, these acquisition of new characters can be either because of particular use or disuse of an organ, or it can be because of the forces or the pressures which have been forced by the environment, the restrictions which have been put forward by the environment. And these characters which, because of either of these two, the organism acquires, it transmits them to their coming generations or the progenies. So these are inherited by the progenies, which is termed as inheritance of acquired characters, and which keep on accumulating generation after generation, leading to origin of new species. So these are the simplified version of postulates of theory of inheritance of acquired character as given by Lamarck. Now let us discuss some of the evidences which he has put forward to support his theory of inheritance of acquired characters. This is very common example which you might have read or heard in your earlier classes in the schools as well. The giraffe story. According to this example, the proposed ancestor of giraffe was not that long, neither in the overall body length or the length of the neck. So their proposed ancestor was just like modern day okapi sized, and it keeps on getting its food on the surface of earth because of lots of vegetation was there. But when this ground vegetation was lost, the tree leaves which were present at a higher part of the tree, the giraffe was unable to reach that. So it had to stretch its neck in order to reach the leaves which are present on the upper part of the tree. And they kept on stretching it. So here you can see The environment is pressurizing the organism. Organism is feeling the new need of longer neck in order to reach these higher parts of the tree. And there is a particular use of the neck. So all these three postulates which we discussed, the new need is there, environment is playing a role, and there is a use of a particular organ, because of which it acquires a new character, which is a longer neck. And ultimately, when these organisms with longer neck reproduced, this character was inherited by the progenies, and generation after generation it kept on accumulating, leading to formation of giraffes with longer neck. So this example tells about the whole story of giraffe, how they acquired longer neck according to this theory of Lamarck. There is another evidence or example given by Lamarck in order to prove his theory of inheritance of acquired character. The example is of the aquatic birds. The aquatic birds, as you might have seen, they do have web in their toes. You might have seen it in the zoo with the aquatic birds, or in your neighboring area if the water body is there. And if the aquatic bird is there, you can see they do have this web on their toes, which they use for swimming and so on, or to survive in the aquatic life. Since they keep on using this this web, these aquatic birds have developed this particular structure. On the other hand, these birds which live in water, they do not fly much. Either they don't fly at all, or if they fly for a very small distance. So they are not using their wings much, which indicates the disuse of the organs. And that is the reason they do not have large or functional wings, but they do have an additional structure which keeps on passing generation after generation. So this is another example of theory of inheritance of acquired characters. The third example can be of the snakes. According to Lamarck, once upon a time, snakes were not like this what we see them as of now. According to him, the snakes also used to have the limbs, the forelegs and the hind legs, etc. And also, they did not have this kind of slender, elongated body. But in order to survive, in order to get the protection, what snakes started using, they started to make the burrows and living inside those burrows. Because of which they developed this elongated body. So they started using this slender elongated body. And because of the limbs, there was hindrance in getting inside the burrows. So generation after generation, they started disusing those limbs because they wanted to have a slender body which can easily crawl inside the burrow. So they disuse the limbs, and that is why after a few generations they stopped having these legs or the limbs. So this is another example of inheritance of acquired characters as proposed by Lamarck. Another example which we can discuss is of the flightless birds. You might have seen the flightless birds like emu or the ostrich. This is emu, this is ostrich. You might have observed they do have a large body size as compared to other birds. But they do not fly. The birds which do fly, they have smaller body size, which is an adaptation to flight. Whereas these birds, since they do not fly, they do have large size and they do not have the wings to fly. Now the question is, how do they develop this? According to Lamarck, even these birds were having the wings and they were not of that large size earlier. But when they moved to the areas which they reside now, for example, the New Zealand, Australia, where these are native of, there was no mammals or the predators to feed upon these birds. So they stopped flying. And since they stopped flying, they stopped using their wings. Because of which, again, there was a disuse of the wings. Ultimately, they lost the wings. And since there was no flying, there was no flight adaptation required, so they acquired large body size. So all these examples he put forward to explain the theory of inheritance of acquired characters. Again, I'm just recapitulating. There is always a new need, because of which the organism acquires characters in its lifetime because of either the environment or the use and disuse of a particular organ, which are being inherited to the next generation or the offsprings, and they keep on accumulating generation after generation, leading to origin of species or the evolution. Now, besides this evidence in support of Lamarckism, there were many criticisms as well. For example, the first thing which was criticized was use and disuse as given by Lamarck. Lamarck said, if we constantly use a particular organ, it enhances its capability, and if we don't use it, it gets lost. So people have asked, if we use the eyes constantly, our eyes capability does not increase. In fact, it reduces. So this does not fit the idea of use or disuse. Yet another criticism came from the tendency to increase in size, which in other words means there is always increase in the complexity of organism. Organism evolved from simple to complex. But this is also not true. For example, the angiosperms are larger structures and they are much older as compared to the shrubs. Shrubs are newer as compared to angiosperms. But angiosperms are larger structures, shrubs are the smaller ones. So again, there is no tendency to increase in size in case of angiosperm to shrub evolution. Then there is another criticism where he has talked about development of new structures depending on the need. Depending on our need, we do not develop the structures. Has it been so, the human beings which do have a long desire to get the wings, they would have got the wings, which is not the case. So the new structures or functions are not acquired depending on our needs. The last postulate of this theory says there is inheritance of acquired characters. The characters which an organism has acquired in its lifetime, they must be inherited. But that is also not true. For example, if there is a blind person who has got blind during his lifetime, the progeny of that do not come blind. They do appear with the normal eyes. An organism who develops muscles, a wrestler for example, their progeny do not come with the muscles itself. If an organism pierces nose or ears in its lifetime, it does not mean that their offspring will also come with the pierced nose or ears. So this theory faced a number of criticism. This criticism was not just theoretical. Various biologists criticized this theory by a number of experiments. One of them is August Weismann, who strongly discarded this theory based on his experiment. Let us discuss the experiment he did. He took the mice and he cut the tail of mice and bred this mice with another tailless mice. To his surprise, the mice which came from these breeding, the next generation, it was again with tail. But according to Lamarck's theory, the character which has been acquired during the lifetime, it must be inherited to the next generation, which is not the case we see here. Not just one generation. Weismann did it for a number of generations, and even after 30-40 generations, what he saw is the new offspring were coming with the tail itself. They were not tailless. So he discarded that the characters acquired in one's lifetime need not necessarily to be inherited in the next generation. Based on that, the August Weismann proposed theory of continuity of germplasm, where he has discussed that it is not all the characters which are acquired in one's lifetime are inherited, but only the characters which are related to the germplasm. The characters which are inherited in the germplasm, only they are being inherited. There is another criticism by Ivan Pavlos. You must have read Ivan Pavlov with the reference to classical conditioning and his famous experiment with the dogs. What he did it was, he kept the food in front of dog and dog started salivation, that is secretion of saliva. In another set, he rang the bell, but there was no response to the dog. In another set, he kept the food and rang the bell. So, dog could feel that bell and the food are sort of associated. After that, after generation or number of experience or learning, the dog started salivation whenever the bell used to ring, even when the food was not there. So they got conditioned that whenever the bell rings, the food is coming and the salivation starts. But if you train the dogs for a few generations like this, the next generation that comes, they do not come learnt already or conditioned already. So learning is not inherited. Learning which is acquired in one's lifetime is not inherited to the next generation. So that was again a drawback to Lamarck's theory of inheritance of acquired characters. Now, to sort out these issues related to Lamarck, the neo-Lamarckism came forward. Now, this neo-Lamarckism was supported by various biologists, including George Henslow, Alpheus Spring-Pecard, Edward Rinker-Kropp, Alpheus Yath, and many others. According to neo-Lamarckism, the acquired characters incorporated in germplasm of an individual are inheritable. Focus on the word germplasm. So the characters, the acquired characters which are incorporated germplasm, only they are inheritable, not all the characters. These characteristics accumulate generation after generation, thus leading to new species or the forms. Neo-Lamarckism supported their views with a number of experiments. For example, they said there is a direct influence of environment on the germ cells. The experiment conducted by William Lawrence Tower on potato beetle, which is also called Colorado beetle and many other names are there. What they did is they exposed these beetles to abnormal heat and humidity. But there was no visible somatic change in the beetles. Whereas the offsprings which generated after these beetles, they had marked color change. So The environment is influencing the germ cells directly, though there was no effect on the somatic cells.